Hey everybody, I'm Joe from the Editing School and Let's Learn Photoshop. Today we're taking a look at editing landscapes. Specifically, if you have a contrasty landscape and you have a sharp differentiation from sky to ground and you get those really ugly differentiating lines and edges, how do you deal with them? Well, today we're going to talk about multiple techniques you can employ in order to solve the problem. Let's get into it. So here I have a very contrasty image. Very contrasty image. How do I actually edit this so that I get really differentiated and nuanced transitions from sky to ground? And let's actually examine the problem, okay? So here is one just fast way that we start to build a basic edit. I want to edit the sky separately from the ground. Well, it seems like that should be easy, right? We go to Select, Sky, and we get a selection of the sky. Great. And then what I could do is, if I want to have this really just locked in, well, what I could do is just to save it, I could just add an adjustment. So let's go ahead and add an adjustment, curves adjustment layer, and it comes in with that selection as its mask. Then what I could do is add a curves adjustment layer. I'm going to take this mask, I'm going to hold Alt or Option and click and drag it, and it copies it onto this mask. Now that's the same mask twice, but if I want this one to be the opposite, all I have to do is invert the mask. Command or Control I. And now we have a mask for the ground and a mask for the sky. Easy as that. Well, let's see what happens when we try to edit this. If I want to take the sky and I want to darken it, I could do so. There's a curves adjustment layer. If I grab the ground, I might want to brighten it. And brighten. And we can start to get something, but take a look at my horizon. Oh my gosh, it's starting to really break apart. It stops looking realistic in those edges. What the heck can we do? Is there anything that we can do? And the answer is absolutely yes, there is. So we're going to look at a couple techniques for this. And we'll start off by saying select sky is just not my favorite way to start doing landscape editing. I don't even like it for selecting the sky all that much, but it's an easy thing, and so we're gonna run with it and try to make it work. So how do I start to fade this so that it really looks good? Let me show you a couple techniques we can do. The first one is going to be the concept of double masking. If you are a Lightroom editor, this is called intersecting masks. We also call it group masking. Let's start with the ground. That seems fine. I'm going to take this layer and put it inside of a group. Command or Control G. And now I'm going to drag this up to here. So this can be my ground group. I've moved the mask from a layer to the group. Any edit I put inside of this this group, only can affect the ground. So for instance, if I just added in a black and white adjustment layer, the ground is black and white, the sky is in color, right? Because this adjustment layer being inside of this group, it can only affect what's inside of the group's mask. Okay? That's the way that works. Now, what am I going to do? What I'm going to do is simply fade this, right? We have the nuance of a mask that moves with the horizon, right? But before we had intelligent masking, we were doing just radial and linear gradients. Well, that's what we're going to add to this. Come back to the curves adjustment layer and add a mask. There's just a little masking button at the bottom here. Click on it. And I'm going to add a linear gradient. Click on that. Your foreground and background colors should go white to black. D to default, X to toggle until it's white to black. And now grab the gradient tool. Come up to the top and choose the gradient. Under basics, you will see white to black, white to transparent, black to white. It is these ways because the very first option is always foreground to background. If I have white over black, then it will be white to black. That's why one is the other, okay? The second one is always foreground to transparent, which is white to transparent because my foreground color is white. And then the third one is always black to white. All right, we're gonna choose white to black. And I want a linear gradient. I'm just going to click and drag up. All right. Well, let's see. That solves most of the problem right there, right? Take a look at this. If I take a look at that horizon, it is much cleaner, right? Here's with and without that mask. okay? Now the problem, of course, is that if I was to really make things crazy, this is way too much, it still is getting not as bright up at the top as we kind of want. In other words, I'm losing some of the effectiveness. The reason for that is that this is transitioning to pure black. So we're getting very little effect right here, okay? You could transition instead of to black into gray. So one thing I might want to do is just take this and get a brightness level I would like, something like there, okay? And then I could grab the gradient here. With the cursor tool selected, you'll see the line. If you don't see this transition line for your gradient, it's because your cursor tool is not the gradient cursor tool. Double click the black right here, and instead of black, we could just make it maybe gray. I could just drag this up. I'm gonna go up until this starts to break apart, and that doesn't look good, and drag it just a little bit lower than that. And that's actually a fantastic solution. That works great. I can do the same thing with the sky as well, right? Click here, right? Command and Control G. Put this layer inside of a group, which I will name sky. Drag the mask from the adjustment layer to the group, and now this group can only affect the sky no matter what. Come to the curves adjustment layer, which right now is darkening to about there. That feels all right. And one thing that I could do is add a mask with that little rectangle with the circle cut out of it button, add a mask, and I could come back to the gradient cursor tool. It should be set up the same way it was before. Now I'm clicking and dragging down, okay? And here, I'm doing the exact same thing, and I'm just feathering some of that effect. So if I take away that mask, it just takes away that harshness right at the edge. And if I think it's doing too much, click on the black and drag it up until you think you've got too much of that effect. It's kind of a little bit weird. Drag it just barely down. So now I'm transitioning from white to gray in order to get a smooth horizon line. And that right there is such a dramatic difference from where we started. This is a good time for me to mention that I have started a new online academy called The Editing School. The Editing School is a community where we talk about editing every day. We have example edits every day. We share before and after. I have loads of recorded classes accessible to everybody who is a member on Lightroom and Photoshop. And we do live discussions and live hangouts 3 times a month to talk about editing in Lightroom and in Photoshop. I will leave a link to the Editing School in the description, and I hope to see you there. Super happy. Is there something else we can do? And the answer is absolutely yes. Here's another technique for you. Well, what I'm going to do is take a look at the mask for the actual ground. And if I take a look at where the ground meets the sky, it is super hard. Super harsh, and this is where that separation happens. You have pixels next to each other that are edited separately, and it separates them and they start to look weird. If I wanted this to transition from sky mask to ground mask and vice versa more smoothly, that would equate to me actually blurring the mask. If I was able to feather or blur the mask, I could actually adjust this. Here's how we do it. There's 2 good ways to do so. The first one is properties. Masks have properties the same way that adjustment layers have properties. So if I click on this mask and look at its properties, I get 2 properties. Density is how much we see through that mask. Feathering is the feathering of the mask itself. So if I dragged this up and then I took a look here, look what happens to this mask as I drag this up. I can feather out where that mask begins and ends, all right? And I get that just little bit better transitioning. Now, if I want these to be really, really smooth, I did this one at, I'm gonna round it, let's call it 100 pixels of feathering. Click on this one, and I could do the exact same thing, 100 pixels of feathering. And now these 2 masks, which are opposites of each other, are feathering the same amount. And that transitions between the 2 really effectively. Okay, great. So now I think I can start editing the ground and the sky really well in between the two, and I'm going to be in good shape to not have ugly separation issues. And if I do, there's another little trick that I can pull. All right, this one's really fun. Let's say that I am looking right at the ragged edge of a mask. And I'm going to take, for purposes of this demonstration, take the feathering back down to 0, even though I really like feathering in these types of masks. If I see this separation, right, of sky to ground, that's looking really, really weird. If I see that, there's another trick I can do. I can grab the actual mask and I could just smudge it a little. Just push that boundary edge just a little bit. Okay, if I grab the smudge cursor tool, all right, and click on a mask, let's show you this so you can actually see it in action, right? I'm going to bring this down. Remember, the smudge cursor tool is a brush. Like any other brush, you can change its hardness and its feathering, all right? For this effect, I like to make it very, very feathered and, I don't know, medium size. You could change that with the brush settings up here, or there's another way. If you work with a Mac, you can hold Control and Option, click and drag. Left and right is size, up and down is hardness. If you work with a PC, you hold Alt or Option and you right click and you get the exact same effect. What I'm gonna do is make this a little bit smaller. What I can do is just start to push the edge of the mask down a little bit. If I get those weird edges, I could just smudge it down. And if I do that, right, I went a little bit too far. I move that mask and I eliminate that hard edge right at the edge of the subject. All right, this is my last resort because I do start to change and get shadowing effects. Right, so I'm much more likely to first add in feathering, all right, and then maybe smudge if I still see some separation. But that works. And right there, I've got a load of tools that allow me to work with really hard edges in sky and ground transition and landscape and get amazing results.